Hello, hello. Happy Monday, everybody. Good morning. I am Manila Chan. That over there is Ted Rall. You are tuned in to the Ted Manila Information Show, otherwise known as the TMI Show for short, because we do bring you too much information. Let's be real. Today, we're going to do a little different of a format because we're bringing our buddy Mark Sleboda on for the full hour because, Ted, I think the full hour is warranted around this whole crazy Oval Office explosive meeting. So I think we need that time. And then, as I predicted on my Friday podcast, Ted, that Zelensky was going to go rapping on the doors of 10 Downing Street immediately after this. And sure enough, he was there.
And of course, the Elysee Palace.
Elysee Palace went to 10 Downing because, you have to go kiss the ring at
they
wherever Zelensky takes it. It's I guess. And yeah, 10 Downing's nowhere near as impressive as the Elysee Palace.
No,
nowhere near.
It's decidedly anti-impressive. I mean, I think that's sort of the point, right? It's sort of like,
is it?
Yeah, I think that's with whatever. I mean, the English do everything in a very considered way, and it's not an accident that 10 Downing Street is
true.
Very unassuming. Yeah.
That's true. Of course, our friend Mark Sleboda is backstage. We're going to bring him on right now. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button, and also follow Mark's channel. I'm going to pop him right on. Hi there, Mark.
I'm going to set us up though and introduce Mark. So, Mark.
Yeah, let's properly introduce.
Give me 45 seconds here. All right, so let's dive into the latest developments in the Russo-Ukrainian conflict, spotlighting that fiery news conference between Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Friday. Let's get into the contentious exchange that unfolded in the White House, where sharp words and clashing agendas left the nation and the world buzzing and Europe on edge. Trump and Zelensky are at each other's throats. Let's see what it all means for the conflict's trajectory. European leaders are rallying or scrambling in response, trying to figure out what to do. Is this new breakdown a shift in U.S. policy, or is Trump just being Trump? Let's look at the effects across NATO and the EU. And there's probably no one better to talk to about this than Mark Sleboda. He's an international relations and security analyst. You can follow Mark on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1, at his YouTube channel at The Real Politic with the C and a K with Mark Sleboda, and get him over on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci, Gramsci. Thanks, Mark, for joining us on the TMI Show.
Ted, Manila, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the TMI Show.
So, Mark, did you watch on Friday, or did you watch the playback, or did you watch every news feed on every social media website ever in the world that all they talked about on Friday was this meeting?
I was not watching it live. All right. I first saw some clips, and then I saw some more clips, and then I saw the 10-minute clip. And it wasn't until the next day that I actually watched the entire 50 minutes, which I think are crucial because I changed my initial assessment.
Totally.
Of what
I went through the same exact process as you did, Mark. Go ahead.
But I think we can safely sum it all up and simply say, censored for YouTube, it was a feces show, right? It was a big stinky feces show. Yeah.
Big steaming pile, Mark. Big
My initial assessment after just watching the 10 minutes, right, that a lot of people saw was that J.D. Vance and Trump were tag teaming Zelensky in what seemed a very comfortable way, and that this was a setup, right?
Yep.
That this
was like an ambush.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of the Western media went with.
SNL went with that.
Yes.
But when you watch the entire 50-minute show,
totally different.
And I call it a show because it was, prime entertainment. Let's be clear about this. This might have been the best performance of Zelensky's life.
Better than a Nora, let me tell you that.
In a comedy role, right? Better than Servant of the People. That's for sure. If you've ever seen
I have.
his show where he played the president of Ukraine before he became the president of Ukraine. After that, it became clear that actually for the majority of this lengthy conversation, all conducted in front of the press and largely to the press, 40 so minutes of it was more or less amicable, right?
Especially the beginning.
Unusual.
Sure.
Yeah. But in this last 10 minutes, I mean, Trump had even said, we're going to take one more question and then we'll go. And they were going to go out and sign or this quote unquote mineral deal nonsense, this political gesture. Then they were going to have lunch and there would probably be a second press briefing. That was it. And Zelensky would have been out of there with having papered over a lot of the tension that had been building between the
and he'd have a full stomach. He wouldn't have missed lunch.
Yeah, I saw the menu. It didn't look that great to me. But anyway, it was reported afterwards, right afterwards, that because the lunch was not going to be eaten by Zelensky, the White House staffers would eat and enjoy. So that's where I saw the.
I hate to see wasted food. That's just my mom talking to me.
I agree.
Yeah. No disagreement. Yeah. So, but it was clear that Zelensky just couldn't keep his mouth shut, right? And went off starting in on J.D. Vance and arguing with him largely about the diplomatic course that the Trump administration was set on, arguing against it in terms where he tried to run over, right, to speak over both the vice president and the president, in succession, and voices grew increasingly louder, and eventually he was kicked out. And I mean, the disrespect, I mean, he was acting like the literal enfant terrible, right? Like the terrible infant.
A bratty kid.
We say enfant terrible in France.
I don't speak froggy, so
Grub up.
You'll have to forgive me.
Speak American, Mark. He was acting like a bratty kid.
A spoiled brat, a petulant, spoiled brat. He has such a sense of entitlement. He threw a tantrum. He was rolling his eyes. He was sighing, right? I mean, anyone who has a 14-year-old has seen Zelensky.
He was petulant. That's if you don't know what petulance is, I point you to this video.
That is it. And the whole suka bliat.
Oh, okay. So there
under his breath. Oh God.
Yeah. So in English, there's about 7 curse words, right? And you more or less hear them in every school playground and every single Hollywood movie, right? In Russian, swearing is quite different, right? Swearing, there is a high intensity, verbiage for this. It's called mat, right? And it is so much more offensive and intensive than cursing in English that you really can't believe it. And what's more, there's so much of it. There are entire dictionaries of mat.
So
right?
It's like having 100 words for snow if you're Inuit.
Yeah.
Right.
And what's more than that is, while it is considered offensive, it is also considered kind of an artistry to swear creatively and profusely, right? It's a big thing in Russia. Again, it is something that you never expect to hear out of your politicians' mouths. I mean, even with the changes in the modern day, it is considered foul. My wife won't let me learn any mat. I mean, she's dead set again. She'll swear in English like a sailor, and having been a sailor, I can attest to that, right? But if she catches me saying anything, and suka bliat, right? How to for the YouTube censored office. Under his breath, when JD Vance started arguing back to him, he muttered in what you can hear something, right? If you are a native Russian speaker, which, by the way, Zelensky is because he swore in Russian, you hear him, you hear and you can see what he said. And suka bliat is essentially saying he was a female dog engaged in prostitution, fornicating crassly. Is that that's what he called
effing B.
Yeah, there we go. Effing B.
Effing B.
What's more than that is he also, even when he was talking out loud to the vice president, he referred to him as JD.
Yep.
I caught that.
Right?
That's how it all started. What diplomacy are you talking about, JD?
JD.
Yeah, JD. Right? And he's in the Oval Office, right?
Yeah, but he's wearing his best Henley. So, there's that.
Okay, so there was a whole lot of context that set this up. Okay, so basically
I'm dressed like the president of Ukraine when I go visit the Oval Office. I'm ready right now. You can send the Escalade to pick me up. I can go visit Trump if I'm Ukrainian.
Is your shirt made by a neo-Nazi outfit in Ukraine? No,
not to my knowledge. No.
Then his clothing is, by the way.
I know.
Right.
And the logo.
Yes.
Yeah. So the logo he was wearing was just the trident of Ukraine. And
but that has fascist.
It does. It's controversial, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would accept that as being separate in the modern day if it hadn't been for the Maidan, right? If it hadn't been for the Maidan, all right, you can get away with it. But since then, everything has become tainted, and he was wearing all Banderite fascist black, right? I mean, that's true. And his face got red enough to add some accent. So, if we rewind about a week, what was going on here? So, Trump wanted to push a diplomatic course demanding a ceasefire and bring this conflict to an end. Really, what he was doing is he wants to save the Kiev regime. I mean, literally, that's what he's doing. And no one else on the Kiev regime itself, the Europeans, they don't want to admit that they're losing this conflict.
No, that's exactly right. Some of the bitching that I've seen from the pro-Ukraine people on social media is like, and also from officials is like, well, we shouldn't give Putin everything he wants. It's like, well, when you lose a war, the victor tends to get everything that they want. I mean, that's how this works.
They are losing, but they don't want to admit it, right? And they will continue fighting, I believe, till the end. I don't ever believe.
What is the end, Mark? What does the end look like? Like the
it looks like the occupation of Kiev and probably Lvov, and then there will still be a guerrilla war afterwards.
Yeah, you and I disagree on this, but that's okay.
Yeah, we disagree.
I mean, Putin doesn't want that, right? I mean, he
doesn't, but he doesn't have any choice.
Isn't it yeah, but I mean, in a way, like there's been reporting about 9 days ago that inside the White House there was a desire to fire Zelensky, basically, that they're done with him, that Zelensky's in the way of a peace deal. It's not just a matter of the Russians not wanting to deal with him. It's more of the fact that it's just like what Trump said. You're not ready for peace. You're not ready to talk. You're not serious. You can't, you won't make a deal. You're not willing to compromise. You think that nothing's changed. And he's like, well, this guy's unreasonable. So we can't have, and obviously he has his take on Putin is that Putin is comparatively reasonable. So he's like, I've got one guy who's ready to talk and I like where he's at. I got the other guy who's not willing to talk. So let's get rid of him. He's a pain in the ass anyway. He's an arrogant little pipsqueak. And let's get someone else, some other Ukrainian who can, who's willing to make a deal. I think it's that simple.
You think that's simple? How do you do that, and who replaces him?
Well, I mean, maybe right. I mean, what right now, if I'm Ukrainian, not that they have a democracy, small d democracy, but if I'm Ukrainian, what does Volodymyr Zelensky bring to me and my country? The only thing he brings is he can get weapons and money from the U.S. That's it. Well, now if he can't do that, what good is he? I mean, what is the point of him? Like, don't need him anymore, right? Like, go to Como and retire.
People, like their opinion has mattered.
And power brokers in Ukraine. Yeah.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with democracy, right? I mean, this is a regime, right? It is a Banderite fascist regime.
But even fascist regimes have to have popular consent.
No, they have to have They have to have not active dissent, right? And they achieve that by having complete control of the security,
you can't
military.
Only rule with fear, though, forever. You know, even Nazi Germany was concerned about public opinion.
Any man who even comes out in public is immediately press ganged, conscripted, and sent off to the front. Which was
I think the first time when Vance mentioned that.
Yes,
that's the first time that information ever appeared on mainstream television.
Yes. I mean, we can listen to that if you want. I mean,
it's something that Americans don't know anything about because the Western mainstream
and they assume it's a lie, probably, or an exaggeration or something, or they just sort of like la la la.
Yeah,
didn't hear that.
Like regime, it's all Russian propaganda, right? Every one of the tens of thousands of videos out there of it, right?
It's completely. I mean, what's maddening to me is how people talk about stuff like this in the United States with great certainty. That they know nothing about, right? But they talk. It would be like if I started like blathering about, football, and I don't watch football ever. But I'm like, the so-and-so is going to win, and just making shit up. I mean, it's like we're talking about Russia's going to invade all of Europe. They just want to invade and put the USSR back together. It's like, Russia hasn't been territorially expansionist since the 19th century. That's several regimes ago. It's like there's literally no evidence of this. You're making shit up. You're paranoid. The U.S., on the other hand, has been militarily expansionist many times since then.
Well, look, it's just as bad as like yesterday at the Oscars last night, having Daryl Hannah going on the stage and saying Slava Ukraini. I bet gross, right? I bet this woman, this actress, doesn't know the first thing about Russian-Ukrainian relations, the littlest thing about the history, but this is what mainstream media has told her. And because she's a Democrat, that automatically, by default, whatever comes out of J.D. Vance's mouth or Donald Trump's mouth has got to be propaganda in her book, because we know Hollywood is...
A lot of it has to do with that.
TDS. So no matter what comes out of their mouths, it's going to be fake.
If Trump embraced kittens and puppies, Democrats would say that all kittens and puppies are evil. Yes, it's
kill them.
For those who don't know, Slava Ukraina, glory to Ukraine, was the slogan of the OUN and UPA, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists and Ukrainian Insurgent Army in World War II, who were Nazi collaborators, responsible for the massacres of hundreds of thousands of Poles, Jews, ethnic Russians, leftists, any Ukrainians who disagreed with them.
Speaking of which, I had someone on my Facebook feed say, I sympathize with the Ukrainians because my family's Jewish, and they came from Ukraine. I'm like, they came from Ukraine because the locals wanted to kill them.
That's
you
the
idiot.
Opposite reason. Yes, it's like the exact opposite reason. Yeah. Well, let's listen to the vice president and what he actually said before Saturday Night Live and the Oscars and everybody started twisting what he said.
It's actually a very important question.
We spoke about this in detail with the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, and others at lunch yesterday. And I know that Secretary of Commerce Lutnick followed up in private meetings last night. This is really important. We believe Americans have the right to speak their mind, even if we in this room disagree with them. They have the right to speak.
That was the question about American companies and social media in the UK. So the fire starts. I'm gonna find it right about here.
Want to see if we can get this thing done. You want me to be tough? I could be tougher than any human being you've ever seen. I'd be so tough. But you're never going to get a deal that way. So that's the way it goes. All right, one more question.
Hey, I want to respond to this. So look, for 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity.
Yeah. Notice JD Vance here, right? This is the first time he has interjected in this 40-minute conversation.
Yes.
And he is not attacking Zelensky. He's not even talking about Zelensky.
That's true.
He is attacking the previous administration's policy. He's attacking Biden. And then he's going to go into what we want is diplomacy. And then that sets Zelensky off. What kind of diplomacy?
What is diplomacy?
Well, by the way, I love that whole, like, I mean, you know, you can't, it's like, oh, well, we can't trust, you know, Zelensky says that, well, you know, we can't trust anything that Russia or Putin says. Well, okay, if you say that, then never in the history of the world would diplomacy ever have settled any issue, because you negotiate with your adversaries and your enemies. You don't need to negotiate with your besties. It's like, I mean, like, it's like, well, how, you know, like when Japan surrendered on the deck of that battleship, you know, it was like, you know, how did we know that they weren't going to start fighting us again? Well, we just, you know, they shook hands. They signed an agreement. We assume they won't do it, you know?
That is actually projection, because, of course, it is the Kiev regime and the Europeans that broke both rounds of the Minsk Accords that had been solidified.
They even admitted that they never meant it. They never meant it. They literally, like, we were crossing our fingers. We never really meant it.
Right. We tricked Pooty into it. Right. Okay. Let's finish Vance.
Is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden of thumping our chest and pretending that the president of the United States' words mattered more than the president of the United States' actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Here we go.
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied our parts, big parts of Ukraine, part of East and Crimea. So
parts of the East in Donbass that had been shelled by Kiev for the past 10 years. But who's counting, Mark?
I mean, you know, to quote Robert Heinlein, right? I mean, war solves a lot of problems. People say that violence doesn't solve anything. And one problem after 1991 was that a lot of Russians were on the wrong side of that border between Ukraine and Russia. And now that problem is largely solved because by this war. I mean, really, truly, I mean, if magically Putin and Russia were like, okay, take it back, all of it, including Crimea, then Ukraine has a problem, right? They have a restive population in the East and in Crimea who don't want the Ukrainian government there.
Right.
They're pissed. And they're going to have like guerrilla warfare. They're going to have, you know, it wouldn't be good. I mean, in a weird way, I mean, this does solve a problem for Kiev as well.
Yeah. And who's counting?
On 2014. So during a lot of years, so I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014, nobody stopped him. He just occupied and took. He killed people. You know what the contact
2015.
2014.
2014 is
2014. Yeah. So
I was not here.
Yeah, but yes, but during 2014 till 2022, the situation the same. That people have been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped him. You know that we had conversations with him, a lot of conversations.
They're dying because Kiev was shelling.
We signed with him. Me,
you're the
president. In 2019, I signed with him.
You're like, you murder your parents and complain you're an orphan.
Macron and Merkel, we signed ceasefire.
Ceasefire.
All of them.
Pause it. He's talking about a ceasefire affiliated with the Minsk Accords. that both he, Merkel, and Macron have all come out publicly and said they never intended to fulfill the Minsk Accords, that they were simply they were playing for time to build up a powerful military in Ukraine. They've all admitted it, right?
They have all admitted
three of them, including him. And now he tries to present it as we can't trust Putin. Oh my God, that is like
I bet Putin's a calm guy, but if he lost his temper, I bet he was throwing things at the TV when Zelensky was saying that.
This is what the kids call gaslighting.
Yeah.
This is gaslighting.
And told me that he will never go. We signed him with gas contract. Yes, but after that, he broken this ceasefire. He killed our people, and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring it into this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine? That you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Count once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring people.
I have social media.
Is what he says. Mr. President, do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States?
Look at Zelensky's body language.
The administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country.
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future.
Yeah, because Putin's coming for New York.
You will not have war.
Here comes the silverback.
Well, the Russian food will get a lot better in
Don't tell us
Manhattan.
what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what
Remember
you're
this.
doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very
You
strong.
will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about
it. From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards.
That's
right now,
undeniable.
You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III.
How is any of that wrong? That was all true.
When have we ever seen an American president express that concern? I mean, yay.
So Zelensky is openly arguing with Trump and with the president and vice president of the United States in the Oval Office in a meeting, right? A public, what is essentially a photo and press op for the signing of a mineral deal, with the understanding that this mineral deal is what the Kiev regime is going to get in place of explicit security guarantees, which Trump is not willing to provide the Kiev regime, which, by the way, Biden never provided the Kiev regime either.
Right.
And that being settled and giving the U.S. a vested economic interest in Ukraine, no matter how real those minerals actually are and how much profit and wealth there really is there. And, the fact that this document is it's a statement of intent. It's not even a real deal. Right?
It's a deal memo, really.
It's a political gesture more than anything else. But the idea was in order to go through a diplomatic process that, of course, would result in unfavorable terms, i.e. not complete victory for the Kiev regime. The Kiev regime was demanding security guarantees. What they wanted was a promise. They wanted U.S. and European troops on the ground in Ukraine after a ceasefire, And then if the war just happened to start up again, because I don't know, someone on the Ukrainian side, the Banderites started shelling Russian territory again, right? Then the U.S. would be at war with Russia. This is what they would. This was what this was all about.
False flags, Mark.
False
I mean,
flags.
just like the Chernobyl thing out of nowhere. That oh no, the Russians are bombing Chernobyl
They've
again.
done it like 3 or 4 times throughout the war. Yeah.
This is why the U.S. is not willing to provide those security guarantees. So, and Zelensky thought when he proposed this nonsense minerals deal, which first of all, Russia has most of the territory that Ukraine has minerals, and second of all, they've blown Ukraine's supposed mineral wealth out of all proportion and rationality. Right? It's not some treasure trove waiting to be exploited there. Now, the terms of this deal are exploitative, right? There's no question about this. But what Trump was saying is you get implicit security guarantees, right? That because America will have a vested interest and because there'll be American workers on the ground exploiting these resources, that no one will dare attack them. Okay, well, that's nonsense. But the Europeans, particularly Boris Johnson, convinced Zelensky to go ahead with this. And also explicit with this deal is that Trump is recognizing that Zelensky is the president of Ukraine, right? Because if he has the power to sign this document, right, you would hear the calls for elections in Ukraine go away, right? Because they just, how could you turn on him after you've just, so this is legitimizing him. This is another thing they were going to get out of it. And the Europeans assured him, right? They said, all right, the U.S. won't give you explicit security guarantees, a promise, but we will play to Trump. We will promise to put our troops on the ground in Ukraine as a reassurance force. And that will satisfy Trump's demand that we have to carry the heavy share of the burdening. But we will demand that for our security guarantees, that the U.S. give us security guarantees, because our militaries are so weak that the Russians would run over them, much faster.
As George Galloway always says, that the UK's military is hardly enough to fill a stadium.
It's a joke. Most people would be shocked at the real state of the British, the French, and the German militaries. They're not even a paper tiger, because even on paper, according to their own assessments and reports and their own medias, their militaries are a joke, right? So they would just be there as human tripwires to then drag the U.S. in. And they said, what we need from the U.S. as a backstop for our forces is we need intelligence, we need logistics, we need air defense cover. We need, essentially, they were arguing for a no-fly zone, which means that the U.S. Air Force would have to divert hundreds of aircraft to Ukraine and engage in an air war over Ukraine with Russia. This is what is all, contained in this, right? And that would be the security guarantee that would draw the U.S. into the war directly, whether Trump wanted it or not, right? And Trump blew off Macron and he blew off Starmer, right? And he wouldn't give them any security guarantees. And so Zelensky here is desperate. He's not getting what he wanted. Macron couldn't get it out of him earlier in the week. Starmer couldn't get it out of him. In fact, Donald Trump asked Starmer point blank at one point, so can you take on the Russians on your own?
Wow.
Cue the room and Starmer giving a nervous laugh. So they thought they were going to snowball Trump here, and Trump was having none of it. And Zelensky was getting panicked and desperate. And he's got this sense of entitlement that says he should get what he wants. And why not? Because for the last 3 years, every time he said he wanted something and he was told no, he'd keep begging for it and eventually would get it anyway. So that's what he did. Only he did it in front of cameras and the press when he had been told explicitly, and the White House has been clear about this, that they were told that this was just a photo op and a signing ceremony. They were not here to re-argue something that has already been settled on. There's not going to be any security guarantees. There is going to be a diplomatic path forward, but Zelensky couldn't let it go. And he tried to guilt trip the president of the United States and the vice president in the Oval Office
and shame him in front of the media.
In the media and the world. And they weren't having any of that. And Trump went into silverback mode, and JD Vance went into attack dog mode, and they mauled him. All right. And it's not the end of the story. And afterwards, all of the Europeans lined up, even as Zelensky went on Fox and said, I have no need to apologize. I will not apologize. They all lined up around him. We stand with you. Be brave, be strong. Right? They all collectively, all of Europe, with the exception, obviously, of Orban and Fitzo, just stood protectively around their petulant, spoiled brat and gave the middle finger to the White House. That's what has just happened.
It was like a diplomatic snap. You go, girl. That was basically what all of the Europeans, just in uniform, in unison, all tweeted the same thing. So obviously it was a coordinated, effort by all of the Europeans. And by the way, Justin Trudeau, I don't know if he got the memo, but he's a North American. He's not European, but I know he likes to play European because he speaks
I thought
French,
he was the 51st state.
That's true, but it's still North American. I get that he speaks French, but he's not actually European. I know he thinks so, but Mark, we got a viewer question for you from Adrian. He says, shouldn't Russia just ignore the theater last Friday and expedite the SMO? Also, what chance?
Exactly what they're doing.
What chance do you think the U.S. will send boots on the ground or air cover?
Yeah. I think that, first of all, let me ask the answer to the last part. Right now, with Trump in office and everything as he has said so far, I think the chance of America getting involved directly now is less than it ever has been, right? If we had Kamala Harris or Biden, right, that would be a different story. But, I mean, it's still not I don't know. I mean, Trump, 1 week he calls Zelensky a dictator, and the next week he says, oh, did I say that? I don't remember saying that, right? So who knows? But I can't see it. With regards to Russia, Russia is fully aware of this. They are certainly entertained by all of this, but they are not stopping the special military operation. They've been clear that as far as they are concerned, they haven't even heard any peace plan, or there hasn't been any peace negotiations so far. And the Kiev regime is incapable of it. So they're just trucking on, and they are just at the prospect that Trump could end up cutting all military aid to Ukraine. They're like, what's going on, Vladimir Vladimirovich? What should we do? And Vladimir Vladimirovich, taking a page from the Chinese, is shh, we should be quiet and do nothing while our enemies are destroying themselves and doing our job for us, right? That's what's happening. I expect to see big offensives this late spring and early summer. Expect to see moves on Zaporozhye, Kherson City, possibly even Kiev. It's definitely coming. Russia is more set than ever of just taking the whole thing, of uprooting the regime completely. They see opportunity in all of this, and they're going to take it. They're not going to let this regime survive, because if Trump, saved it, if they were sensible enough to let Trump save them, then Russia and Ukraine's security problem would just be kicked down the road. Right?
Well, what about U.S. backing and funding? I mean, it does look like, that's going to be severely curtailed, right?
Well, I mean, it hasn't as of yet. Nothing's changed.
As of an hour ago, Zelensky was just telling the press that U.S. military aid is still being received in Ukraine, which doesn't mean that might change, right? We're told that the White House is going to discuss it today. But the Europeans have made clear that even if the U.S. stop, they're not going to stop, and they're going to help the Kiev regime fighting, which they're not going to be able to make up for the U.S., but, I mean, it will still drag it on for another year and a half, maybe.
Or maybe not. Maybe the Ukrainians will come out of their foxholes and get serious, or maybe they'll overthrow Zelensky and put in someone who's willing to talk.
Bring in Zelensky, who would be a more committed Banderite fascist general.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not like
or Poroshenko.
But I mean, people aren't. But I mean, are all the Ukrainians stupid? I don't think so. Right? I mean, they must.
No,
see,
it's
they can see the writing on the wall.
Politically repressed. There are no opposition parties. They've all been banned. All their leaders have been hunted down. Thousands of Ukrainians have been assassinated by the regime for daring to not agree with their political course of the country since 2014. There is no organized resistance in the country because there hasn't, they've stamped it out so completely. Anyone who sticks their head up and so much as snaps a picture of one of Russia's drone or missile strikes immediately gets sent to the front or prison or possibly both. There is no ability to resist on the ground. You have to understand how jackboot thugged Ukraine is at this point. Because even if
the Democratic Party, right, Mark? There's no, for example, the Democratic Party here back home, there are no horses left in the stable. They're scrambling right now after the 2024 elections to figure out who's next to bat, right? They don't have anybody right now. So, and there's nobody left in Ukraine that can stand.
There's not even any opposition parties in Ukraine, right? There are only minority parties.
What about the guy that just tweeted this weekend? I forget his name, but he was calling for new elections and for Zelensky to step down. He's an MP, but is that? I mean, I felt like when I read that,
he's an ex-MP and he's in prison.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
I did not know that. Okay,
how's he getting his message out then?
What?
How's he getting his message out?
I mean. People do tweet. I mean, Navalny was tweeting from prison all the time, right? I mean, that does happen. I mean, I'm sure now he will not have that access, that he had it before. But people do get their stuff out, right? I mean, it was tweeted to his account. It doesn't mean that he typed it,
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Well, yeah, because we see locked up political prisoners all over the world.
Yes.
Get their messages out through their people or their lawyers or whatever. I mean, how is the PKK leader who's been in prison since 1999 calling for disbanding the PKK from behind bars and tweeting, right? So that's fair. Yeah. I think Robbie had a question also. I think I'm going to pop producer Robbie on there. Robbie.
Howdy. Yeah, so I have a little bit of a different take about this whole theater that happened on Friday. I think that Zelensky knows that politically his goose is cooked when it comes to Trump. So I wonder if the reason why he put on that show in front of the press pool was to get political meat for the never Trumpers, the neocons, and the Democratic and Republican parties to try and force Trump through Congress to continue the support for the Ukraine war. What do y'all think about that?
I don't think it was a performance. There was what he was trying to argue. And yes, there might have been an intention in the fact that he was arguing to do that, but it was only knee jerk. It wasn't like this was some plan.
I think it was a Hail Mary.
You see the face of the Ukrainian ambassador face palming and crying just a few feet away as all of this is going on. And Yermak keeps stabbing his own hand with his fist as it's happening, right? this was not. This was unintentional in what happened. It obviously was. Zelensky he lost it. He lost it. He couldn't control his own sense of entitlement and
I think that's right.
Panic.
Gotcha.
I think that's right. I agree with Mark. I don't think any of this was staged, as even though the mainstream Western press is trying to present it as such, that, you know, like Ted pointed out earlier, that SNL did a whole skit about this, that they, you know, deliberately sandbagged him in front of the press. I don't think that was it at all. I think
no, I thought that at first, but once I saw the full thing, it became clear.
By the way, there were questions from the press that followed this widely reported exchange, right? And it went on. This event went on for quite some time after this explosion. But you could sort of see, everyone trying to normalize things. But Zelensky looked absolutely shocked.
He was pissed.
Yeah. Well, I think he was stunned.
Yeah.
That
all three: shocked, stunned, and pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the most telling thing that I got out of it was there towards the end, about Ted just now talking about, was in Trump when he started kind of revisiting the whole Russiagate scam. And he said, "No, Putin went through all this crap with me. I mean, we were in this together."
But they're doing that now.
No, you can just hear the heads exploding. And so, Liz Cheney this morning, she came out tweeting, saying, "No, we have to stand with Ukraine. No, Trump wants to just bend the knee to Putin." And my whole question, I mean, let's just assume that Mark is right, that I don't know, maybe Zelensky's having cocaine withdrawals, controlling his emotions or whatever. How is Russia going to deal with Luxembourg throwing its support behind Ukraine? Like, is that creating fear in the streets of Moscow?
Actually, I think I've got word right now that the Kremlin is considering an unconditional surrender.
I would think so.
I would
Mark, Estonia's pissed too. So, Putin better run and hide in a foxhole somewhere. Spider hole.
There's an old Russian expression: the dog barks, the caravan passes on.
But I'll just ask this question real quick, and I'll jump back off. And I think you had touched on a little bit ago. But do you think that the Russian army will push onto the Dnieper River this summer and maybe to Odessa, or do you think they just keep being methodical?
Yeah. So I think that the Russian military is going to be doing multiple things at once because they're capable of it. Even the Kiev regime is reporting about a 200,000 strong new Russian army that hasn't been committed to the fight yet. Right. So I think you're going to see Russia. The main thrust, the most important, will be taking this last Kiev regime defensive line. First, Pokrovsk, and then Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and Konstantinovka in Donbass. At the same time, you are going to see Russia very likely move up north from Zaporozhye in the direction of Zaporozhye city. And there's a lot of evidence that they might make a contested crossing of the Dnieper to take Kherson city, right? They've been doing a lot of drills. And that will, first of all, help stretch out already way overstretched Kiev regime forces very far. But Russia has a priority of taking Kherson city and Zaporozhye city because it has declared that Kherson and Zaporozhye are part of Russia. So if negotiations get underway, sometime late next year, right, that gets serious, then they want to already have that settled or close to settled on the ground. But I think you're probably also likely to see something once the Kursk pocket is followed up, is completely rooted out, and that's very close to being wrapped up, right? Russia has the last supply line into Suja practically cut at this point, and they've got Russian forces on the other side of the Ukrainian border there already in Sumy. They will continue on and take Sumy, the city, as well as the region, and then they will march right back in towards Kiev again from Sumy, like they did in 2022.
Mark,
Is Odessa on the menu?
Is Odessa? Odessa's really hard to get to, right? Even in World War II, the Soviet Union went the long way around through Kiev first and then down to Odessa. You would have to first go through Kherson City and then Nikolaev and then Odessa. I mean, I know Russia, there's a lot of Russians that will feel that this is not complete unless Russia gets at least the east of the Dnieper, including Odessa. But it is more likely that Odessa, if it is gained, will be gained in surrender terms rather than through a military occupation of Odessa. The geography just isn't for it. An amphibious assault on Odessa would be so costly. Russia they don't have amphibious assaults are always messy and awful, right? And Russia doesn't have a huge amount of amphibious assault capability. It's never been a priority for them. And you might notice that quite a number of Kiev regime's / NATO's attacks on the Black Sea Fleet over the last 3 years have been specifically against troop transports.
Mm-hmm.
What about the relationship, setting aside Ukraine? It seems pretty clear that Donald Trump really wants to have a good, he wants to warm up relations with Russia, right? Would you say that's fair? So
absolutely. And I think it's important to separate these two things, right?
Maybe so.
Because improving bilateral and diplomatic relations between Russia and the U.S. is happening, and a settlement of the Ukraine is it's not entirely separate, but it is a different course. And one can happen, primarily the first one, without the other.
I guess that's exactly what I mean. That was my feeling. I wanted to just get your take on that. I mean, It seems like I don't think Trump's going to I think to me, the big takeaway of Friday's contretemps is that there's no longer any need for Trump really to worry that much about Zelensky or Ukraine when it comes to the rapprochement with Russia, because he's getting eaten alive Trump's getting eaten alive by the neocons and the Democrats in the media anyway, as being like, he's sucking up to Putin. So he's got nothing
doing
to
Putin's
lose
dirty
now.
work.
He might as well go for that friendship anyway and get all the advantages that come with it economically and politically.
This is exactly Russiagate 2.0, Mark. I mean, it's been debunked. People know Russiagate is debunked now. I don't think all people. I think people that have really drank
my
the Kool-Aid.
Parents don't believe that. I mean, my parents
really.
A lot of people. No.
A lot of people are still there.
No, it's still a majority opinion that's true, even though it's false.
You have people like Chuck Schumer repeating the narrative, saying, "Oh, well, now Trump obviously is doing his best friend's bidding now. He's doing Putin's bidding. Look at him attacking our European allies."
Yeah.
But I mean, this again, they're trying.
Thomas Friedman.
To stop peace.
Thomas Friedman in the Times wrote over the weekend that in the almost 250 year history of the United States, there's never been a European ally treated like this. And and I was kind of like thinking, well, first of all, I wrote for the Wall Street Journal, which they're currently editing my piece. I'm pretty sure they're going to run it about Charles de Gaulle and his relationship with FDR, which was worse, actually. He hated de Gaulle. So I get into all the details, but yeah, it's like basically this whole but this has never happened. Nothing like this has ever happened before. And it's like, but I think at this point, it's kind of, the breakup is now well underway, right? I mean, Trump doesn't have to care about Zelensky anymore.
Yeah, Ukraine has never been a treaty ally of the U.S. And the U.S. regularly spies on, there was the whole Operation Gladio during the beginning of the Cold War, where the U.S. was directly preventing democracy from resulting in leftist governments in Italy and Greece and other European countries. So, and okay, I love the qualifier in Europe because that completely neglects the U.S. throwing the Afghan regime they installed under the bus, the Kurds under the bus so many times that no one can even keep track of, throwing Saddam Hussein under the bus after he had been a proxy that they put in power. The U.S. has
Manuel
a
Noriega.
long history.
Manuel Noriega, don't forget him.
Of tossing
Right.
its proxies to the side when they're no longer useful.
Yeah, I mean, basically, Zelensky has just been treated like a used snot rag, and he's being tossed aside now.
It is. I will say that the change in U.S. foreign policy that is occurring between the Biden administration and the Trump administration is the most radical change in U.S. foreign policy that certainly in modern history, perhaps in all of U.S. history. He is taking on the blob. He is taking on the U.S. foreign policy orthodoxy, the deep state, if you will. Right? That's his primary war. He's at war in D.C. Against the blob, against the deep state, the permanent bureaucracy, whatever you want to call that. And it is such a radical change in U.S. foreign policy. Nothing like this has happened before. We don't know what the end of it is going to be, but hey, Chinese curse, we're living in interesting times.
Well, Mark, let me, in the last couple of minutes that we're bending your ear, let me ask you about U.S. and the broader EU, real EU, not, and the UK, of course, because they're no longer EU, but barring Ukraine, what do you think this does to the U.S. relations with the other Europeans, including the United Kingdom, when you have Keir Starmer, even though he says he's going to send billions of dollars to Ukraine, and when he went to Kiev about a month or two ago, he signed this 100-year unlimited partnership deal, that's kind of carte blanche. Parliament hasn't even discussed what that deal is going to look like. But what does this do for the U.S. relations with the UK and with the broader EU when these guys are saying they're willing to send boots on the ground in Ukraine? Trump has said, no way, no boots on the ground, and we're limiting funds. But then Starmer comes out and says, right here, he's saying, no, I don't call the U.S. an unreliable ally. When a reporter asked, do you consider the U.S. an unreliable ally?
Yeah, everyone's talking about the damage to U.S.-Ukrainian relations, but there is a huge amount of damage occurring to the transatlantic relationship right now. And we're a month into the Trump presidency? We got 4 more years, right? I mean, I'm not saying that NATO is going to be dissolved and fall apart, but I will say that the way things are going, anything's on the table. Look, Trump hates all the European leaders, right? They all openly sided with his opponents. First in his first campaign during the Russiagate hoax, right? In the second campaign, Keir Starmer and other European countries all deliberately sent agents to campaign for the Biden Biden-Kamala Harris campaign, right? They hate him, he hates them, and there's some payback. Right? For Trump, it's personal. He's getting some payback.
J.D. Vance mentioned that on Friday. Yeah. He mentioned that Zelensky had campaigned for Harris in October.
For Harris. He doesn't forget. He's King Elephant now, right?
Why would he forget?
No. And remember when Trump came in the first time, he took a wrecking ball to the JCPOA because it was Obama's supposedly signature foreign policy legacy. Well, the Ukrainian conflict is Biden's foreign policy legacy, such as it is. And I think Biden, in an act of revenge against Zelensky, I mean, it's probably part of his rationale. He does have a foreign policy vision, a grand strategy vision, I think, as well, if you want to call it that. But a lot of it is personal. And he thinks by taking a wrecking ball to this, if he can get away with it, he can get revenge against the European leaders, against Zelensky and the Kiev regime people, and Biden all at the same time.
Well, I
Okay.
think that's what we're witnessing for sure. Is within a month, U.S.-European relations. I'm not going to say irreparably damaged, Mark, because
Yeah,
the
that's
Europeans
a big
know-
word.
Yeah, the Europeans, no matter how much they want to chest thump, they know full well they're not going to get anywhere, or at least very far, without any U.S. support. So they cannot cut off the U.S. entirely. They can talk smack all they want, but you know,
They waited
comes to
out
brass
Trump
tacks-
the first time. They think they can do it again.
Right.
And they're just praying that JD Vance doesn't follow him up.
Well, see, I was going to say with JD Vance's, if you want to call it a performance, whatever it was that we just saw, I think that secured JD Vance's, the passing of the baton to JD Vance in MAGA world, because the MAGA world, the populace, the people that actually brought MAGA to power, they don't want, external wars. Their foreign policy, the MAGA populists, are more aligned to like that of Ron Paul.
Some of it is. Some of it is. Some of it doesn't.
A lot.
Some of it doesn't care about foreign policy. Let's
Yes.
be honest. Americans do not vote on foreign policy. They never have,
Right.
and it ever. I mean, okay, you can say that all polls in the U.S. are incorrect, and there's something there, right? I mean, there obviously, but I have not seen a single poll of people's opinion, Republicans or Democrats, that listed foreign policy or Ukraine or anything among their top 10 voting priorities for the election.
I agree.
And it's a truism. Now, there is a vocal minority of the MAGA people, very influential online and elsewhere. And it appears that Trump Jr. is one of them, right? So that there is something there. But I think it's always important to remember that if Trump turned around tomorrow and said, we have always been at war with Eurasia, Russia, right? That the majority of the MAGA people would flip on a dime. Sorry. I mean, the ones out there watching this show, I'm not talking about you, right? Because I know there's some MAGA people out there watching this. And
of course.
Yeah, okay, we don't agree with you on everything. I certainly don't. But be honest that you do not represent the average American or even the average Trump supporter. You're a little step up above. You like to be informed about the rest of the world and care about it. And that is not the perspective that most Americans, when they go to vote. Sorry.
That's true. I would agree with that assessment for sure about the average American.
We shouldn't project. We all care about this as one of the most important things on our lives, but let's not project our feelings about this onto an average voter unless there's some serious polling information to back it up.
Yeah, I think a lot of these people that we're looking at on the screen there, including the one that's not European, Justin Trudeau, I think they're all hoping that the Trump world gets expelled from Washington. Period.
Yeah, what I see there is a vampire's ball.
Yeah, this is not great. I mean, I attended CPAC 2 weeks ago. Georgia Maloney, she's hidden back there next to Justin Trudeau.
Trying to hide.
She delivered a video speech. She was invited to speak ahead of Donald Trump. Olaf Scholz, if you look at the positioning of the seats at the table, literally at the table, Mark, Olaf Scholz is on his way out as chancellor. He's got a number of days left, right? They put him off. The heads of the table were Macron and Starmer and Zelensky, and Scholz. Look, he wasn't even in the camera view. They put him off to the side. Like the Germans, even the new guy that's coming in, Merz, he's also Olaf Scholz.
More of a hawk on Ukraine much
Yeah.
more of a hawk than Schultz.
So, I mean, if this message gets out there to the bulk of the MAGA crowd that might be listening, that are more the typical MAGA crowd, let this be their thing, that they understand that if they care about America first, truly, then you don't want American boots on the ground. If you don't want that, then you should tell the Europeans, if this is your war, you want to continue this war, then have at it. You guys should have at it. If this is what you want, spend your money, spend your tax dollars, go have expensive gas prices, go have this war. If this is what you want, you guys have at it. We got our own internal problems to fix.
But Article 5! Article 5!
All right, Mark.
Yes, always
we're-
appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much for coming on.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
it's
having me.
always-
It's always a blast, guys.
Always fun with you, and it's a lot of like hard truths, right, that people won't talk about, but so we're a little cynical and funny about it. But you know, I mean, it is what it is. This is the political landscape we're in, and so takeaway is this doesn't change anything, is what I understand, Mark. This doesn't change anything. SMO goes on.
It changes things, but not as much as people might. Probably not as much as people might think.
Yeah, SMO is going to go on. Is
Yes.
what I see. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
But-
until a deal is signed.
But also, Russia and the United States are going to get closer.
They are.
I think so.
Yeah, that's also probably true. Yeah. And who knows, right? Anything could happen, right? And maybe the war will end, and I don't think so. But you know, anything's. I don't hope, right? I don't do hope. But
I think Zelensky's days are numbered, but we'll see. All right.
I just would be more afraid that whoever replaced him would be worse and far more competent.
That can always
and
happen.
not throw
That's it.
tantrums in the Oval Office.
The history of revolution makes that clear. But anyway, all right. Not that
That's
this would be a revolution. Mark Sleboda is an international relations and security analyst. You can follow Mark on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1, on his YouTube channel at The Real Politic with Mark Sleboda, and find him on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mark.
guys.
All right. So, I mean, I feel bummed out that going into the weekend, Ted, I thought we saw an end to the war, and I'm not so sure anymore.
Mark is a very smart man, and he might well be right, but I could be right too. I think. Look, the thing is, the U.S. economy and its military has been financing the Ukrainian side of this war, and that's going to come to an end. And when that comes to an end, I mean, look, let me take you back to 1974, when Congress cut off the funding to to South Vietnam. That's how the war came to an end. It wasn't the peace conference in Paris people always talk about, or Henry Kissinger and his Nobel Prize. It was about basically they cut off the funding, and and obviously at a certain point they just didn't have as much materiel to fight the North anymore, and that was it. And then they were overrun. That's exactly what will happen here.
I hope that part is right. I just read, I believe, from the AP this morning that the Europeans are saying they're going to produce like all kinds of stuff within the European Union. This is what it is, Ted. It's a big freaking contracts deal to launder money for the military industrial complex. And now they're saying they're going to do it, outside of the U.S. and it won't be American arms.
They don't have
manufacturers.
I mean, look, to bring up Hitler again, one of his things that he failed to calculate was, and he, when he was told by his generals who had visited the United States, you don't want to drag the U.S. into the war. You have no idea about their industrial capacity. It's just immense. It's impossible for us Europeans to compare. And that's still true, right? So, I mean, the UK and France have formidable militaries, for countries that size. But compared to the U.S., it doesn't even come close. It's a drop in the bucket. The U.S. assistance has had the Ukrainians barely hanging on and losing, really, like slowly losing. So you take that away, I mean, and it's not like the French and the Brits and the Germans haven't already been sending material to the to the Ukis. They've already a lot. I mean, pretty much the same amount as we have. So without us, I mean, the Ukrainians are done. They're going to have to sue for peace. That's it. And I think the thing is, the good news is, I think the Russians will give it to them because they don't want to occupy all of Ukraine. It's a pain in the ass. They just want they want the parts. They just want the Donbass and Crimea, and then they want no NATO. That's it.
Right.
And they'll get it. So yeah.
It's just
the
matter
interesting thing is,
I'm less optimistic.
People who are upset about Ukraine having been invaded, like, oh, one country shouldn't invade another country, blah, 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 blah. It's like, look, if you really take emotions out of it, what Russia is asking for is perfectly, eminently reasonable. I mean, sort of objectively, Russia should possess the Russian ethnic-dominated places in Ukraine that should have never been in Ukraine, in the Ukraine SSR in the first place. They just should. Not joining NATO, that makes the world safer if Ukraine's not in NATO. It's like, that's, and Russia's like, fine, join the EU, we don't care. So, I mean, there's really not, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's like, it's if someone says like, oh, I'm going to come over and make dinner for you and then do sexual favors for you. You should be like, okay. It's like, just say yes. It's an easy yes. It's not like, it's not like the Russians are like, we demand to change your government. We're going to install our puppet. That's
what the U.S. did.
You have to do this and that and the other. Yeah, that's what the U.S. does. But like, we don't do, the Russians don't want any of that. They don't even want to own. They don't want to rent. They just want like, leave us the fuck alone.
Just be a good neighbor.
Well, speaking of sexual favors, YouTube just sent us one, Ted.
Oh, wow.
So, as y'all know, we hit 500 subscribers, I guess, about 2 weeks ago. And YouTube just sent us an email. They've approved our memberships. So if you are watching on YouTube, if you would like to be able to financially support the channel like the folks on Rumble have been doing, there is now a join button that you can find on our YouTube channel and next to all of our videos. Click that, and there's 3 different tiers that you can subscribe to, so we can actually start making money on YouTube now, and maybe start paying some of the bills.
And I hope that YouTube has an easier way, easier system. The Rumble thing, it's like basically like
YouTube is much easier.
It's like laundering money through Mars.
It's an invisible click button on Rumble. It's invisible. You got to hover.
It literally looks more like a chat button, really.
Yeah, no, YouTube makes it much easier. Rumble should really take a lesson from it. Scott Stannis, God bless him, he just became a YouTube subscriber or channel member on my YouTube channel. And it took him, he was never able to do it on Rumble.
No, but he literally texted me this morning asking me how I did it on your Rumble.
Yeah, no, it's a pain in the butt. YouTube makes it easy, but no, on YouTube, there's a join button that you'll see next to all of our videos, next to all the live streams on the channel itself. YouTube wants your money, and they make it very easy to take your money. So for those of you on YouTube now, you can support the TMI show, and it would definitely help a lot because right now, this is the only job that Ted Manila have, and they're not getting paid anything. It's basically all volunteer work. So any kind of support y'all can throw their way, I know they appreciate it. That's all I got.
Thank you. It's true. A passion project. Thank you, Robbie.
Thanks, Robbie.
Yeah, it's definitely a passion project. And Ted and I felt the need to keep, as longtime viewer and friend of the show, Scary Girl says, fight the bastards. Right?
Always.
We continue to always fight the bastards, and whoever they may be. And in this case, I think we've pointed out, maybe not so eloquently, but definitely pointed out, it's a lot of the people that are in the EU right now. I'm not very happy with them, Ted. And Justin Trudeau, who thinks he's part of the EU.
Well, Justin Trudeau will not be with us for much longer, as you know.
Neither's Olaf Scholz. All these people just.
And by the way, there is no political support in England or in France for sending troops to Ukraine.
Right, but they're promising them anyway.
Yeah, so
they're saying we'll do it.
This is posturing. This is ridiculous.
I don't know. I think what we're going to see, Ted, is what happened on Friday is giving birth to the very thing that Emmanuel Macron pitched about 5 years ago of creating this European-only, non-NATO NATO, this European-only this European-only defense mechanism where it's only the Europeans without any U.S. interference. And I think that's what we're seeing come from this in this conference that we saw where Olaf Scholz, was pushed off to the side. I think that's what's ultimately gonna happen from this. And I think they're gonna ask the Ukrainians to join later. I'm not saying this is tomorrow, but at some point when the SMO is over, I think that's what we're gonna see next. And so, because Vladimir Putin, if he says no NATO, and the Yukis are like, okay, fine, no NATO, and then they go and join this new European, military baby that Macron pitched years ago, then that's a loophole. So, and round we go.
Well, we shall see. I always say that. My dad always used to say that.
I know.
Trump likes to say that. I don't know. It's a thing.
I don't know what else. I don't know what we do. That's it. So
let's go.
We'll be back Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm out Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
In the potential 52nd state of Iceland.
Oh yeah.
We get Greenland first, 51st, and then we get.
I would tell you to say hi to penguins, but they'd probably only be at the zoo.
I thought puffins live there, don't they?
Yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah,
I think
not penguins. There. Penguins are Antarctic.
Well, aren't puffins in the family?
That's a good question. I'm gonna look that up right now.
I think they're like a type of penguin. I think puffins are actually native to Iceland. Oh, I lost Ted. Ted was looking up the puffins, and yeah, I think puffins are native there. Anyway, I guess I'll just say goodbye on the show. But Ted was looking up whether or not puffins were native, or are puffins penguins is the question. Are puffins penguins? I'm asking the Googles. No, puffins and penguins are not the same. They belong to different families and have distinct characteristics. Puffins can fly and are found in the northern hemisphere, while penguins are flightless and primarily inhabit the southern hemisphere. There you go. All right. Okay, so that does it for me. Oh, Ted's popping back on. Ted, there you are. I just read the answer from the Googles. It says no, puffins.
Manila, I think you're muted.
No, I'm not muted.
Oh, I don't hear you. All right. Well, anyway, I don't hear you.
We're out of here.
Bye.
We're out of here. Thank you, guys.
That's what happens with my puffinry.
We'll see you tomorrow. Bye. That's not it.